Frog. A frog is any member of a diverse and largely carnivorous group of short-bodied, tailless amphibians composing the order Anura. The oldest fossil, proto-frog, Triadobatrichus is known from the early Triassic of Madagascar, but molecular clock dating suggests their split from other amphibians may extend further back to the Permian, 265 million years ago. Frogs are widely distributed, ranging from the tropics to subarctic regions, but the greatest concentration of species diversity is in tropical rainforest. Frogs account for around 88% of extant amphibian species. They are also one of the 5 most diverse vertebrate orders. Warty-frog species tend to be called toads, but the distinction between frogs and toads is informal, not from taxonomy or evolutionary history. Frogs. Temporal range, early Jurassic to present. Scientific classification, kingdom, Animalia, phylum, Chordata, class, Amphibia, clade, Salentia, order, Anura. Numeral, 1806. Suborders. Archaeobatrachia, Mesobatrachia, Neobatrachia. An adult frog has a stout body, protruding eyes, anteriorly attached tongue, limbs folded underneath, and no tail. Frogs have glandular skin, with secretions ranging from distasteful to toxic. Their skin varies in color from well-camouflaged dapple brown, gray and green to vivid patterns of bright red or yellow and black to show toxicity and ward off predators. Adult frogs live in fresh water and on dry land. Some species are adapted for living underground or in trees. Frogs typically lay their eggs in water. The eggs hatch into aquatic larvae called tadpoles that have tails and internal gills. They have highly specialized rasping mouth parts suitable for herbivorous, omnivorous or planktivorous diets. The life cycle is completed when they metamorphose into adults. A few species deposit eggs on land or bypass the tadpole stage. Adult frogs generally have a carnivorous diet consisting of small invertebrates, but omnivorous species exist and a few feed on plant matter. Frog skin has a rich microbiome which is important to their health. Frogs are extremely efficient at converting what they eat into body mass. They are an important food source for predators and part of the food web dynamics of many of the world's ecosystems. The skin is semi-permeable, making them susceptible to dehydration, so they either live in moist places or have special adaptations to deal with dry habitats. Frogs produce a wide range of vocalizations, particularly in their breeding season, and exhibit many different kinds of complex behaviors to attract mates, to fend off predators and to generally survive. Frogs are valued as food by humans and also have many cultural roles in literature, symbolism and religion. They are also seen as environmental bellwethers, with declines in frog populations often viewed as early warning signs of environmental damage. Frog populations have declined significantly since the 1950s. More than 1/3 of species are considered to be threatened with extinction and over 120 are believed to have become extinct since the 1980s. The number of malformations among frogs is on the rise and an emerging fungal disease, chytridiomycosis, has spread around the world. Conservation biologists are working to understand the causes of these problems and to resolve them. Etymology and taxonomy. The use of the common names frog and toad has no taxonomic justification. From a classification perspective, all members of the order Anura are frogs, but only members of the family Buffonidae are considered true toads. The use of the term frog in common names usually refers to species that are aquatic or semi-aquatic and have smooth, moist skins. The term toad generally refers to species that are terrestrial with dry, warty skins. There are numerous exceptions to this rule. The European fire-bellied toad has a slightly warty skin and prefers a watery habitat, whereas the Panamanian golden frog is in the toad family Buffonidae and has a smooth skin. Etymology. The origin of the order name Anura, and its original spelling Anus, is the ancient Greek, alpha privative, prefix an, without, and aura, meaning, animal tail. It refers to the tailless character of these amphibians. The origins of the word frog are uncertain and debated. The word is first attested in Old English as frogger, but the usual Old English word for the frog was frask, and it is agreed that the word frog is somehow related to this. Old English frosk remained in dialectal use in English as frosch and frosk into the 19th century, and is paralleled widely in other Germanic languages, with examples in the modern languages including German frosch, Norwegian frosk, Icelandic froskur, and Dutch was. These words allow reconstruction of a common Germanic ancestor *froskas. The third edition of the Oxford English Dictionary finds that the etymology of *froskas is uncertain, but agrees with arguments that it could plausibly derive from a Proto-Indo-European base along the lines of *pru, meaning jump. How Old English frosk gave rise to frogger is, however, uncertain, as the development does not involve a regular sound change. Instead, it seems that there was a trend in Old English to coin nicknames for animals ending in G, with examples themselves all of uncertain etymology, including dog, hog, pig, stag, and wig. Frog appears to have been adapted from frosk as part of this trend. Meanwhile, the word toad, first attested as Old English tardage, is unique to English and is likewise of uncertain etymology. It is the basis for the word tadpole, first attested as Middle English tadpole, apparently meaning toad head. Taxonomy. About 88% of amphibian species are classified in the order Anura. These include over 7,100 species in 55 families, of which the Crogastoridae, Hylidae, Microhylidae, and Biphonidae are the richest in species. The Anura include all modern frogs and any fossil species that fit within the Anuran definition. The characteristics of Anuran adults include 9 or fewer presacral vertebrae, the presence of a urostyle formed of fused vertebrae, no tail, a long and forward-sloping ilium. Shorter forelimbs than hind limbs, radius and ulnar fused, tibia and fibula fused, elongated ankle bones, absence of a prefrontal bone, presence of a hyoid plate, a lower jaw without teeth consisting of 3 pairs of bones, an unsupported tongue, link spaces underneath the skin, and a muscle, the protractor lentis, attached to the lens of the eye. The Anuran larva or tadpole has a single central respiratory spiracle and mouthparts consisting of keratinous beaks and denticles. Frogs and toads are broadly classified into 3 suborders: Archaeobatrachea, which includes 4 families of primitive frogs; Mesobatrachea, which includes 5 families of more evolutionary intermediate frogs; and Neobatrachea, by far the largest group, which contains the remaining families of modern frogs, including most common species throughout the world. The suborder Neobatrachea is further divided into the 2 superfamilies Hyloidea and Rhenoidea. This classification is based on such morphological features as the number of vertebrae, the structure of the pectoral girdle, and the morphology of tadpoles. While this classification is largely accepted, relationships among families of frogs are still debated. Some species of Anurans hybridize readily. For instance, the edible frog is a hybrid between the pool frog and the mars frog. The fire-bellied toads Bombina bombina and B. variegata are similar in forming hybrids. These are less fertile than their parents, giving rise to a hybrid zone where the hybrids are prevalent. Defense. At first sight, frogs seem rather defenseless because of their small size, slow movement, thin skin, and lack of defensive structures, such as spines, claws, or teeth. Many use camouflage to avoid detection, the skin often being spotted as streaked in neutral colors that allow a stationary frog to merge into its surroundings. Some can make prodigious leaps, often into water, that help them to evade potential attackers, while many have other defensive adaptations and strategies. The skin of many frogs contains mild toxic substances called baphotoxins to make them unpalatable to potential predators. Most toads and some frogs have large poison glands, the parotoid glands, located on the sides of their heads behind the eyes and other glands elsewhere on their bodies. These glands secrete mucus and a range of toxins that make frogs slippery to hold and distasteful or poisonous. If the noxious effect is immediate, the predator may cease its action and the frog may escape. If the effect develops more slowly, the predator may learn to avoid that species in future. Poisonous frogs tend to advertise their toxicity with bright colors, an adaptive strategy known as aposematism. The poison dart frogs in the family Dendrobatidae do this. They are typically red, orange, or yellow, often with contrasting black markings on their bodies. Alobates zaparo is not poisonous, but mimics the appearance of two different toxic species with which it shares a common range in an effort to deceive predators. Other species, such as the European fire-bellied toad, have their warning color underneath. They flash this when attacked, adopting a pose that exposes the vivid coloring on their bellies. Some frogs, such as the poison dart frogs, are especially toxic. The native peoples of South America extract poison from these frogs to apply to their weapons for hunting, although few species are toxic enough to be used for this purpose. At least two non-poisonous frog species in tropical America mimic the coloration of dart poison frogs for self-protection. Some frogs obtain poisons from the ants and other arthropods they eat. Others, such as the Australian corroboree frogs, can synthesize the alkaloids themselves. The chemicals involved may be irritants, hallucinogens, convulsants, nerve poisons, or vasoconstrictors. Many predators of frogs have become adapted to tolerate high levels of these poisons, but other creatures, including humans who handle the frogs, may be severely affected. Some frogs use bluff or deception. The European common toad adopts a characteristic stance when attacked, inflating its body and standing with its hindquarters raised and its head lowered. The bullfrog crouches down with eyes closed and head tipped forward when threatened. This places the parotoid glands in the most effective position. The other glands on its back begin to ooze noxious secretions, and the most vulnerable parts of its body are protected. Another tactic used by some frogs is to scream, the sudden loud noise tending to startle the predator. The gray tree frog makes an explosive sound that sometimes repels the shrew Blarina brevicorda. Although toads are avoided by many predators, the common garter snake regularly feeds on them. The strategy employed by juvenile American toads on being approached by a snake is to crouch down and remain immobile. This is usually successful, with the snake passing by and the toad remaining undetected. If it is encountered by the snake's head, however, the toad hops away before crouching defensively. Distribution: frogs live on all the continents except Antarctica, but they are not present on certain islands, especially those far away from continental land masses. Many species are isolated in restricted ranges by changes of climate or inhospitable territory, such as stretches of sea, mountain ridges, deserts, forest clearance, road construction, or other man-made barriers. Usually, a greater diversity of frogs occurs in tropical areas than in temperate regions, such as Europe. Some frogs inhabit arid areas, such as deserts, and rely on specific adaptations to survive. Members of the Australian genus Cyclorhina bury themselves underground where they create a water-impervious cocoon in which to estivate during dry periods. Once it rains, they emerge, find a temporary pool, and breed. Egg and tadpole development is very fast in comparison to those of most other frogs, so breeding can be completed before the pond dries up. Some frog species are adapted to a cold environment. The wood frog, whose habitat extends into the Arctic Circle, buries itself in the ground during winter. Although much of its body freezes during this time, it maintains a high concentration of glucose in its vital organs, which protects them from damage. Locomotion. Different species of frog use a number of methods of moving around, including jumping, running, walking, swimming, burrowing, climbing, and gliding. Jumping frogs are generally recognized as exceptional jumpers and, relative to their size, the best jumpers of all vertebrates. The striped rocket frog, Latoria nisuta, can leap over 2 meters, a distance that is more than 50 times its body length of 55 millimeters. There are tremendous differences between species in jumping capability. Within a species, jump distance increases with increasing size, but relative jumping distance decreases. The Indian skipper frog has the ability to leap out of the water from a position floating on the surface. The tiny northern cricket frog can skitter across the surface of a pond with a series of short rapid jumps. Slow motion photography shows that the muscles have passive flexibility. They are first stretched while the frog is still in the crouched position, then they are contracted before being stretched again to launch the frog into the air. The forelegs are folded against the chest and the hind legs remain in the extended, streamlined position for the duration of the jump. In some extremely capable jumpers, such as the Cuban tree frog and the northern leopard frog, the peak power exerted during a jump can exceed that which the muscle is theoretically capable of producing. When the muscles contract, the energy is first transferred into the stretched tendon which is wrapped around the ankle bone. Then the muscles stretch again at the same time as the tendon releases its energy like a catapult to produce a powerful acceleration beyond the limits of muscle-powered acceleration. A similar mechanism has been documented in locusts and grasshoppers. Early hatching of froglets can have negative effects on frog jumping performance and overall locomotion. The hindlimbs are unable to completely form, which results in them being shorter and much weaker relative to a normal hatching froglet. Early hatching froglets may tend to depend on other forms of locomotion more often, such as swimming and walking. Walking and running. Frogs in the families Bufonidae, Rhinophrenidae, and Microhylidae have short back legs and tend to walk rather than jump. When they try to move rapidly, they speed up the rate of movement of their limbs or resort to an ungainly hopping gait. The Great Plains narrow-mouthed toad has been described as having a gait that is a combination of running and short hops that are usually only an inch or two in length. In an experiment, Fowler's toad was placed on a treadmill which was turned at varying speeds. By measuring the toad's uptake of oxygen, it was found that hopping was an inefficient use of resources during sustained locomotion but was a useful strategy during short bursts of high-intensity activity. The red-legged running frog has short, slim hind limbs unsuited to jumping. It can move fast by using a running gait in which the two hind legs are used alternately. Slow-motion photography shows, unlike a horse that can trot or gallop, the frog's gait remains similar at slow, medium, and fast speeds. This species can also climb trees and shrubs, and does so at night to catch insects. The Indian skipper frog has broad feet and can run across the surface of the water for several meters. Swimming. Frogs that live in a viscid water have adaptations that improve their swimming abilities. The hind limbs are heavily muscled and strong. The webbing between the toes of the hind feet increases the area of the foot and helps propel the frog powerfully through the water. Members of the family Pipidae are wholly aquatic and show the most marked specialization. They have inflexible vertebral columns, flattened, streamlined bodies, lateral line systems, and powerful hind limbs with large webbed feet. Tadpoles mostly have large tail fins which provide thrust when the tail is moved from side to side. Burrowing. Some frogs have become adapted for burrowing and a life underground. They tend to have rounded bodies, short limbs, small heads with bulging eyes, and hind feet adapted for excavation. An extreme example of this is the purple frog from southern India, which feeds on termites and spends almost its whole life underground. It emerges briefly during the monsoon to mate and breed in temporary pools. It has a tiny head with a pointed snout and a plump, rounded body. Because of this fossorial existence, it was first described in 2003, being new to the scientific community at that time, although previously known to local people. The spadefoot toads of North America are also adapted to underground life. The plains spadefoot toad is typical and has a flap of keratinized bone attached to one of the metatarsals of the hind feet which it uses to dig itself backwards into the ground. As it digs, the toad wriggles its hips from side to sink into the loose soil. It has a shallow burrow in the summer from which it emerges at night to forage. In winter, it digs much deeper and has been recorded at a depth of 4.5 meters. The tunnel is filled with soil and the toad hibernates in a small chamber at the end. During this time, urea accumulates in its tissues and water is drawn in from the surrounding damp soil by osmosis to supply the toad's needs. Spadefoot toads are explosive breeders, all emerging from their burrows at the same time and converging on temporary pools, attracted to one of these by the calling of the first male to find a suitable breeding location. The burrowing frogs of Australia have a rather different lifestyle. The western spotted frog digs a burrow beside a river or in the bed of an ephemeral stream and regularly emerges to forage. Mating takes place and eggs are laid in a foam nest inside the burrow. The eggs partially develop there, but do not hatch until they are submerged following heavy rainfall. The tadpoles then swim out into the open water and rapidly complete their development. Madagascan burrowing frogs are less fossorial and mostly bury themselves in leaf litter. One of these, the green burrowing frog, has a flattened head with a short snout and well-developed metatarsal tubercles on its hind feet to help with excavation. It also has greatly enlarged terminal discs on its forefeet that help it to clamber around in bushes. It breeds in temporary pools that form after rains. Climbing. Tree frogs live high in the canopy, where they scramble around on the branches, twigs, and leaves, sometimes never coming down to earth. The true tree frogs belong to the family Hylidae, but members of other frog families have independently adopted an arboreal habit, a case of convergent evolution. These include the glass frogs, the bush frogs, some of the narrow-mouthed frogs, and the shrub frogs. Most tree frogs are under 10 centimeters in length, with long legs and long toes with adhesive pads on the tips. The surface of the toe pads is formed from a closely packed layer of flat-topped, hexagonal epidermal cells separated by grooves into which glands secrete mucus. These toe pads, moistened by the mucus, provide the grip on any wet or dry surface, including glass. The forces involved include boundary friction of the toe pad epidermis on the surface and also surface tension and viscosity. Tree frogs are very acrobatic and can catch insects while hanging by one toe from a twig or clutching onto the blade of a windswept reed. Some members of the subfamily Philomeducinae have opposable toes on their feet. The reticulated leaf frog has a single opposed digit on each forefoot and two opposed digits on its hind feet. This allows it to grasp the stems of bushes as it clambers around in its riverside habitat. Thank you. Please subscribe and share this channel.